Pride flags. They can be pretty, they can be colourful, they can be the polyamorous flag. While a lot is often said about their designs and meanings, their history is often overlooked despite the incredibly interesting stories behind their creation. This video will explore said overlooked history, namely with the LGBT flags. There are hundreds of pride flags and unfortunately I can't cover each and every one of them, so I am limiting myself to any gay, lesbian, bisexual and trans flags. This is the 1978 pride flag. It was designed by Gilbert Baker in 1978. Prior to it, there are only symbols associated with the LGBTQ+ community, such as the pink triangle, and Baker wanted to make something better to represent his community. The story behind it is actually rather long, with Baker's autobiography being the best documentation of it. The driving force behind the making of the 78 flag was both Baker and Cleve Jones, the latter being the protege of the notorious civil rights advocate Harvey Milk. The idea apparently came to Baker after a party in which they took substances and were all in a swirl of colour and light, which is where the idea of making the flag a rainbow originates. Baker and Jones advocated for the creation of two massive pride flags to be made and flown for the Gay Freedom Day Parade in 1978. The pair managed to secure $1,000, the equivalent of nearly $5,000 today, to fund the creation of the flags. Along with the help of another notorious advocate, Lynn Selgerblom, known as Fairy Argyle, as well as James McNamara, the two giant pride flags would be created and flown at the Gay Freedom Day Parade, and quickly become a notorious and defining part of the community. A fragment of these original flags was actually rediscovered in 2019 after being unknowingly flown at a Stonewall parade, which now sits in the GLBT Museum according to San Francisco Bay Times. When it came time for the Freedom Day Parade the next year, Baker had a more ambitious plan: to create 400 pride flags to be flown across San Francisco with a budget of $10,000, which my inflation calculator tells me is the equivalent of $44,000. When presented to Paramount Flag Company, it turned out that the 8-stripe flag would be too expensive to manufacture, so the pink and turquoise bars were removed. One lawsuit later, the 400 flags were made and flown, making the 6-stripe flag the definitive one for 40 years. There were a few variants of the flag created, the most notable being the Victory Over AIDS Pride flag, which added a black stripe to commemorate the victims of the epidemic, and the Philadelphia Pride flag from 2017, which added black and brown stripes to symbolise the people of colour in the LGBTQ+ community, who are victims of unique intersectional oppression. That was until 2018. 40 years after the first pride flag was created, a non-binary artist called Daniel Quasar created the Progress Pride flag, intended to highlight the unique conflicts which face the modern-day LGBTQ+ community, namely the oppression of racial minorities and trans people. They added the black and brown stripes from the Philadelphia Pride flag and the trans colours in a triangle pattern. Later, in 2021, the intersex flag would be added to the Progress flag, leaving us with the current flag. In many ways, the different versions of the pride flag can help visualise the struggles that the community has faced over time. The 78 flag was the first attempt at creating a pride flag. The rainbow flag would be a far simplified and easier to create version of the flag which could be spread far better. The VO8 and Philadelphia flags would be a response to temporary protest movements, the AIDS epidemic and BLM protests respectively, and the last two Progress flags would be created to symbolise the forward momentum needed to tackle the current issues which the LGBTQ+ community faces. In a way, these pride flags have become a form of visual history, detailing the many challenges the LGBTQ+ community has faced for nearly 50 years. It's very likely that one day the Progress flag will be usurped, and a new one which better represents the issues the community is facing will be made, creating another link in the history of the movement. However, the rainbow flags are far from the only pride flags with an interesting history. From my research, it appears the first sub-community pride flag for the LGBTQ+ community is the bisexual flag, created in 1998 by Michael Page. There's not a ton of available information about Page, unfortunately. He even lacks a Wikipedia page, nor can I find any photos of him online. However, his work is widespread. The bisexual flag remains widely unchanged from its original design and is very iconic within the LGBTQ+ community, being directly and indirectly responsible for every subsequent pride flag. The first trans flag was designed by Monica Helms in 1999, directly inspired by her friend Michael Page's bisexual flag. It, like the bisexual flag, saw widespread adoption and to this day is yet to be replaced by any alternative. Helms has since become a major figure within the trans community. As a US Army veteran, she set up the Transgender American Veterans Association in 2003, which she sat as the president of for a decade. She was also a delegate for the 2004 Democratic National Convention. Needless to say, she has a very long and noteworthy career. The trans flag has had far more limited government acceptance. Whereas the rainbow flag is consistently flown by many governments worldwide, the trans flag has had a much colder reception. Brighton and Hove Council is generally considered the first government entity in the world to have flown the flag in 2010, followed shortly by San Francisco Castro District in 2012. The US has seen the flag flown the most by government entities, particularly by state governments, although broadly it seems many governments are far more unwilling to fly it. However, despite there not being major rivals to the trans flag itself, like the rainbow flag, it has led the way for many sub-community flags. The genderqueer and non-binary flags, created in 2011 and 2014 respectively, both represent labels which are often considered tangential or a sub-label of trans. Neither have been flown by local or national governments from what I can find, despite the latter being an increasingly more popular flag. One of its more notable uses was during the 2024 Eurovision contest, where the winner Nemo flew the flag, the first MB to win in the contest's history. The lesbian flag has had a far longer evolution. Unlike the trans and bisexual flags, whose design has remained largely the same for decades, the lesbian flag has undergone many revisions. Similarly to the trans flag, it was directly inspired by the bisexual flag, but unlike the trans flag, it was nowhere near as popular and universally accepted. Ironically designed by a man, the major issue people had with the flag was the upside-down black triangle, a symbol which the Nazis applied to lesbians. Deciding against the mainstream adoption of that flag, several alternatives were proposed. In 2010, the lipstick lesbian flag was designed by Natalie McCrae. While still more popular than the 1999 design, accusations of racism and transphobia against the creator tainted the perception of the flag, and it failed to really hit the mainstream. Finally, in 2018, we arrive at the generally accepted lesbian flag. Designed by Emily Gwen, the flag quickly became the accepted flag by the lesbian community, helped by its trans and genderqueer representation. The lesbian flag is interesting in part because of how long it took to arrive at one which people felt universally comfortable adopting. The trans flag was designed within a year and adopted almost immediately. The bisexual flag the same. All the major rainbow flags were instantly beloved. But the lesbian flag took nearly 20 years to go from initial inspiration to a final product which would be adopted broadly, with the seeming overarching reason being far more community divide compared to other identities. In a way, similar to the rainbow flags, the lesbian flags themselves tell an evolving story, going from a flag which uses a Nazi symbol to one whose entire design is rooted around broad acceptance. So that's the core four. As I said, there are many more pride flags that could be covered. However, a large number of them are incredibly recent and don't have a ton of story behind them, so they're a bit less necessary to discuss. I would highly encourage further reading on this subject if you're interested though. As mentioned before, Gilbert Baker has a great autobiography, but so does Monica Helms, so I'd highly recommend both. It'd feel wrong to conclude a video on LGBTQ+ topics right now without acknowledging the current threats against trans rights in the US and also in the UK. In the US, trans people are living in fear of their government, with Texas making moves to make trans people completely undocumented. Meanwhile, in the UK, the current status of trans people is unknown as the Supreme Court made an incredibly dangerous ruling, which potentially revokes trans women's status as women. So to finish, I'd like to mention some of the means to support trans people. In regards to direct action, you can attend protests in both countries, write letters or emails to politicians, and be part of political campaigns for trans supporting candidates. You can also donate to several organisations which can help. In the UK, the Good Law Project, Gendered Intelligence and Switchboards are excellent targets for donations. In the US, you have the Trevor Project, the Transgender Law Centre, and the Advocates for Trans Equality, all of which will be linked in the description of the video. With that being said, like and comment on the video if you enjoyed it, and yeah, bye.